The HOA cop was screaming, clutching his head, staring at the steel-reinforced fence he had just rammed into, the same fence Grandpa warned him about. But if you want to understand how we got here, you need the beginning. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. I grew up on our family ranch, Cedar Line Ranch, 300 acres of open pasture, split rail fencing, and a red barn that had stood longer than most of the families in this county. My grandpa Henry Cole had lived here since he was 12, his father before him, his grandfather before that. This land wasn't property, it was blood. Grandpa always said, a fence is a man's handshake. If you respect it, you respect him. For decades, nobody ever crossed ours, until Sage Hill Estates popped up across the ridge, a polished HOA neighborhood with perfect lawns, golf carts instead of cars, and residents who thought rural land was something you could vote your way into owning. Their HOA vice president, Linda Caraway, was the worst of them. She believed that a clipboard in her hand made her the sheriff of the valley. It started with letters. Your fence is too close to the community boundary. We will be inspecting your perimeter for safety issues. Our HOA patrol will verify access rights. Access rights? Cedar Line Ranch had been established 80 years before Sage Hill even existed, but Linda insisted there was an old access road cutting through our pasture. A total lie. Grandpa mailed back a single sentence: there is no easement on my land. Stay off it. That should have ended it, but instead it began something worse. The next morning, just after sunrise, we heard it. Crunch. A white SUV, marked with HOA cop in giant yellow letters, had driven straight into our fence. The driver backed up, drove off, and left a 4-foot break in the rails. Grandpa shook his head, grabbed his tools, and repaired it. The next day, crunch. Same SUV, same damage. Same driver pretending it was a mistake. Day 3, crunch. This time, Grandpa waved him down. The man rolled down his window, smirking. We're conducting boundary testing, he said. HOA business. Nothing you can do about it. Grandpa stared at him a long, hard second. You hit my fence again, son, and you're going to hear from me, not the wood. But every morning the pattern continued. The engine, the acceleration, the impact, the broken rails. Grandpa tried reporting it to Sage Hill's HOA office. Linda Caraway crossed her arms and said, your fence is illegally placed. If our officer accidentally makes contact during inspection, that's your responsibility. That was the moment something changed in Grandpa's eyes. When we got back to the ranch, he stood in front of the damaged gate, rubbing his jaw. Then he said quietly, all right, if they want a fence war, they'll get one. And that's when the real story began. Grandpa didn't yell, he didn't curse, he didn't even look surprised when our fence got rammed for the 4th time in a week. He just stared at the broken rails, jaw tight, and said, all right, if they want to play demolition derby with my property, let's give them something real to hit. And that's when the plan began. For the next 2 days, Cedar Line Ranch sounded like a metal workshop. Grandpa hauled out the old welding rig he hadn't touched since I was a kid. Sparks flew from sunrise to sundown as he cut, measured, and reshaped steel rails he'd kept stored in the barn for the day someone forgets their manners. We dug trenches for buried anchors, 2 feet deep, bolted into concrete. We reinforced the main gate with thick steel crossbars hidden behind the visible rails. The entire frame was industrial grade, layered twice, welded tight. To the naked eye, it looked like a normal rural gate. To anyone stupid enough to ram it, it was a brick wall wrapped in paint. Grandpa even smiled when we finished. This'll hold, he said, wiping sweat from his brow, and when it doesn't, it'll hold the lesson that follows. But Grandpa wasn't done. He climbed the fence post and screwed a small weatherproof box onto it. A tiny, nearly invisible ranch cam, motion-triggered, night vision, angled perfectly toward the road. I want proof, he muttered. They deny it again. We give them evidence they can't wiggle out of. And we didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I heard it before I saw it, the familiar roar of the HOA patrol SUV barreling down the dirt road toward our boundary. Dust flying, tires chewing gravel. Same driver as always. The fake HOA cop Linda Caraway kept sending. Only this time, we were ready. He stopped just short of the fence and stepped out, sunglasses on, puffed up chest, fake badge bouncing on his vest. He kicked one of the posts and smirked when it didn't move. You old ranchers don't learn, he muttered loud enough for the camera to hear. Let's see if your replacement breaks as easy as the last one. He climbed back into the SUV. Grandpa didn't move. He just stood on the porch holding a hammer over his shoulder like a modern-day judge. The engine revved hard, then harder. Then he floored it. The SUV shot forward, front bumper aimed straight at the gate. Wham! Metal screamed, glass cracked. The entire front end crumpled like a soda can under a boot. Airbags detonated inside the cab. A hiss of coolant blew upward like a geyser. The SUV bounced backward and rolled to a smoking stop. Hood bent at a 40-degree angle. The HOA cop tumbled out, staggered, clutching his head with both hands, screaming just like in the photo, staring at the steel rails as if they'd betrayed him personally. Grandpa didn't raise his voice, didn't move his feet. He just rested the hammer on his shoulder and said, calm as a Sunday sermon, and that's what happens when you ram a man's land after he warned you. The camera caught every second. And now, it was finally time to make the HOA choke on the truth. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. The dust was still settling when Grandpa finally exhaled. Steam poured out of the HOA SUV, the front bumper folded like paper against the reinforced steel rails. The driver, the same fake HOA cop who'd been ramming our fence every morning, was sitting on the ground, clutching his head and groaning like he'd just been hit by a charging bull. I pulled out my phone immediately. Sheriff's office, the dispatcher answered. This is Noah Cole at Cedar Line Ranch, I said. We've had another trespasser, same guy we reported last week. This time he rammed his vehicle into our fence and injured himself. You'll want to bring a unit and medical. The dispatcher didn't even hesitate. Deputies are already en route. Of course they were. Sheriff Colton Dawes had told Grandpa last week, call me the second they show up again. I'm tired of these HOA idiots thinking laws stop at their mailbox. So when he pulled in minutes later, sirens off but lights flashing, it wasn't a surprise. It was a promise fulfilled. His truck rolled to a stop, gravel cracking under the tires. He stepped out slow, taking in the wrecked SUV, the bent metal, the dazed fake HOA cop rocking on his heels. He whistled low. Well, Sheriff Dawes said, looks like your fence talked louder than my warnings. Grandpa crossed his arms. He hit it again, Colton. Every day this week. I told you it wasn't accidental. Sheriff Dawes crouched beside the crying man. Name? He asked. The HOA cop whimpered. Travis, I was told to check the boundary. Dawes held up a hand. Save it. You rammed a private fence at full speed. That's destruction of property and impersonating law enforcement. He turned to me. You got footage? I nodded and pulled out the SD card from the hidden post camera. Sheriff Dawes slid it into his tablet, and within seconds, the whole pattern came to life. Travis driving onto our land, ramming the fence repeatedly, ignoring posted warning signs, circling back as if it were a game. And finally, today's glorious crash in crystal clear resolution. The sheriff's face hardened. Well, that's enough evidence to bury an HOA. We followed him to the SUV wreck as paramedics lifted Travis onto a stretcher. His pride was hurt worse than his body. Before they loaded him in, Sheriff Dawes leaned close. You're going to tell me exactly who sent you, because I already know damn well you didn't come up with this on your own. Travis didn't hold out long. It was Linda, he blurted. The HOA vice president. She told me to apply pressure until the ranch owners cooperated. Sheriff Dawes sighed. There it is, the confession I was waiting for. By sunset, deputies had arrived at Sage Hill Estates. Linda Caraway was arrested on her front porch, still holding her little clipboard, shouting about community authority while neighbors filmed her with their phones. She was charged with conspiracy to commit property damage, criminal trespass, filing false HOA authority, harassment. Penalty: 9 months county jail plus $18,000 in fines plus permanent removal from the HOA board. The fake HOA cop Travis was charged with felony property destruction, impersonating law enforcement, reckless endangerment. Penalty: 14 months in state jail plus $22,500 in restitution for my steel fence plus loss of his vehicle. The HOA president, who genuinely had no clue what Linda was doing, immediately suspended her and called for an emergency board meeting. 3 days later, Sage Hill Estates voted to dissolve their enforcement branch entirely. No more fake cops, no more threats, no more fence wars, and our ranch, peaceful again. Grandpa stood beside the steel reinforced fence one last time and patted the top rail. Funny thing, he said, give a man a rule, he'll test it. Give him a steel fence, he'll learn it. He looked at me, smirking. And that's how a steel reinforced fence ended a crooked HOA's entire operation. Tell me, would you have warned them like Grandpa did? Or let the fence do the talking? I'd love to know what you would have done. The end.